So on the extreme end of the spectrum, and what made me think of this question for a podcast is when someone hears that fossils can be radioactive, there's one wild theory that I've heard that was postulated on a show called Ancient Aliens, apparently, where this is the extreme end of the spectrum, but it's a fun thought, at least, even though it's most likely very not true, is that the dinosaurs, the age of the dinosaurs, the extinction event wasn't the Chicxulub asteroid, which more on that in a second.
Yep.
But it was actually alien beings surrounding Earth with their spaceships and basically nuking the entire surface of the Earth to get rid of all these pesky dinosaurs to make way for humans. And that's why the dinosaur fossils or any ancient creature's fossils are radioactive, is because the aliens were using nuclear weapons to clear the slate for a higher intelligence, being human beings. Now, I would say that to my knowledge, and possibly to yours, there's not a lot of supportive evidence for that.
No, I wouldn't say there is. The Chicxulub impact, the iridium layer you find at the KT impact, the layer of where you stop finding, the large dinosaurs at least.
Right.
I don't believe that there's any evidence that that's coming from a nuclear bombardment, right? It seems like that's a more natural bombardment, and just in terms of an asteroid impact, it's a rare earth element. It's found a lot more in space, right? But it's not a component of any like nuclear devices, at least that mankind has ever made.
Right.
So it's one that I don't think has ever caught much mainstream support. I would say. And sometimes, fossils can be more radioactive than just the sort of background you'd find in the formation that they're in, but a lot of that has to do, again, with sort of their what's the word I'm looking for here? Their tendency to absorb those minerals from the groundwater at a different rate compared to some of the sediments around them. Sandstone being like very porous probably allows water to flow through it a lot easier. These being porous, they tend, but having much lower porosity and a lot lower permeability, do tend to absorb water, but not and retain it at very different rates. And then that also makes a difference in terms of what sort of minerals they absorb and how long, and whether or not they stay there or are carried away by groundwater too. And it's not something that you find universally. It's not in every formation. It's not across the globe, generally speaking, right? This Jurassic Morrison formation is about 150 million years old. So it's well before that KT extinction about 66 million years ago.
Way before.
Yeah. So it's very separate sorts of extinction events, and that radioactivity isn't sort of a uniform blanket across the globe.
And a lot of when it comes to radioactive fossils, one being radioactive and one being another, I should say one being more radioactive than another, it is purely circumstantial and specific to that fossil circumstances of becoming mineralized. When you build camps on a river, you're aware of what's upstream of the river. You don't put a dead horse in the water upstream of your camp where you're drawing water, because you're going to draw all the bacteria and all the nasty things that come off of that decaying horse into the population of your camp and everything like that. So it's a similar way, in my mind, you can correct me if I'm wrong, with fossils. It matters where they were over the millions of years that it took them to mineralize. Were there radioactive components leaching into the sediment and leaching into the water when they were becoming mineralized?
Absolutely.
And in the case of a lot of Morrison formation stuff, at least Dipsy in this case, there were some radioactive materials in the water, and you can test it. You can see that the fossils are a little bit more radioactive than the background radioactivity. But you can find a fossil, even in I would assume, correct me if I'm wrong, in the Morrison formation, that its circumstances were different. Even just perhaps a few hundred yards away or a mile away, this fossil is not very radioactive compared to this one, which just so happened to have all these circumstances surrounding it to make it more radioactive.
Yeah, there's a whole discipline in paleontology and some of the, it applies to other disciplines too, like archaeology, but it's called taphonomy, right? It's the study of basically everything that happens between the animal dying and it being found. It's the whole study of just the conditions of its burial, what sort of circumstances and what sort of conditions it's been subjected to. And that's something you do on a site-by-site basis. It's a very discrete area. You don't try and do that for the entire, Jurassic Morrison formation or anything like that. It's these conditions, even though they might have all, the formation generally formed in sort of similar conditions across that area, every little area is subject to its own little quirks and things like that.